Hey guys, so today we're going to be showing you a Serd example, so a serialized deserialized example for JSON, as well as how do you organize the code base. So I'm not going to go over all this code in great detail since I already went over the arbitrary JSON, which is a bit more complicated than this. The most important things you need to know is this COW, which is not cow, it's called clone on write, which is it's a struct to help you write more highly optimized code. And the other thing is that you probably want to import Serd, serialize, deserialize instead of a Rocket Serd. So to do that, you need to have the dependency for that. And I recommend this because in the documentation, if you just use Rocket Serd, you have to add another line of code every single time you use derive, serialize, deserialize. So that's kind of annoying, which is why I imported Serd directly. And next, we'll talk about this string. So in the documentation or examples for JSON, you'll see that they also do it this way, which is why I did it this way. But I'm pretty sure you can get away with just using string like this. So this is probably done. It's probably done like this because of you want to promote perfect optimized code. So you want to promote the best practices, which is like this. I don't know if it's okay. Or I know it's okay, but I don't know if it's best practice to have the same lifetime for two different variables in the struct. But you can figure that out in your complex examples. It's not really a hard thing to do because you can just do A and then B like that, right? And I've also provided a more complicated example. So what if you wanted to nest it? So here I have a vector of names, and I've called it names. So it's kind of funny, but yeah. And over here is the routes. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of what's that called? In terms of organizing your code base, you want to create a file for like a related routes or a directory for related routes. And in the index of that subdirectory or the module, basically, you want to define two variables. So one variable is the base, which is the base path over here. So when we mount it, we have to provide a base, right? So you can either hard code it in the main file or you can hard code it in the module itself. I've decided to use the module approach because hard coding in the main file gets kind of complicated, especially if someone's editing solely a subdirectory, then they don't need to touch the main file. And you can still hard code in the main file to override it. Or if you wanted to say, I don't know, import someone else's code that doesn't define a base for you. So that's how you do it. And you want to also create a function called routes, which returns all the rocket routes. And the reason you have to use a function and not a variable is because routes returns a vector of routes, and vector is dynamic. So you can't really you can't export it as a static or a const here. And the alternative was to use a crate called lazy static, but Rocket already does so much. I don't think you should be adding additional crates for something that you shouldn't be doing because you only need to call routes once and use it once. So if you did lazy static, it would always be in memory, and you might not need that to be in memory in the globally, right? So moving onwards to how do we deserialize? Well, it's the same way as the arbitrary JSON. So over here, let's just ignore this. It's basically like a sample API request. So I included that example because, maybe you want to do it that way. And let mute names equals response.json. And then we do names here. So this is same as before with the arbitrary JSON. You just put the type here. And I made it mutating so that we can show a mutating example. So then we do names.0.push. So we use .0 because this is a struct without named fields. If you use the struct with name fields, then you just put the field name over here. And lastly, we want to return this struct as a JSON, right? We want to return the struct as JSON. So we just wrap it around this JSON guard, basically. Okay. And of course, we have to put the types here. So it's like this. And I've used underscore here because it's easier that way. If you use an actual lifetime, you have to also add it here somewhere. I also added a post example for this JSON. So for this example, suppose the data is names. So someone posted with the data as a JSON object, and this Rocket deserializes it for you. So it does all the checking. And like before, what if we want to mutate it? So then we just make it a mutating variable and we just mutate it. Since it's already in a JSON guard, we have to do this .0.0, and we don't have to return the JSON over here anymore because it's already guarded. Lastly, I also added the arbitrary JSON example in this file because, it's just easy to have it all in one place. And now moving on to organizing your code. As I said earlier, you want to use a base and a routes, and you want to use public to export it from a file. But how do we import it in the main file, for example? Well, you have to use mod. So mod Serd examples is what I used. And I've also moved all the Tauri releases code to its own file. So there you can see I've modded that. I imported that. And I also used the use keyword to, hardcode, get the Tauri GitHub release cache over here. Now I probably, because I have it in its own file, I don't even have to have it like such a long word anymore, since I already know it's a Tauri related thing. So I could just do cache or GitHub cache, right? So GitHub cache or something, or release cache. I don't have to put that Tauri prefix anymore if I really wanted to. And I don't actually have to use it like this, but I decided because it's such a simple thing that I should just do it like this. And how you access the module is you just do the the double colon, and I think that's pretty easy to know and works all fine. And to mount the routes, you can just call routes as well as use that the base variable. That makes it your life very easy. And suppose you wanted to import this utilities file with common functions in another file. So if we go over here, we can see what I did. And what I did is I said mod utils like before, but since utils is not in a subdirectory of Tauri releases, we need to tell Rust to, use a different path. So then you specify the path, which is relative to the source directory instead of the Tauri releases subdirectory, and then we're all good. Then I used use utils to use all these utility functions and, replace all these functions. So from the last couple of videos, some things I did differently is I used a cache. I wrapped the mutex calls. So I decided to wrap the mutex calls instead of wrapping the, the Tauri GitHub thing, because it was just easier this way. And you can use it for all types of string value caches, not just one. And it does all the locking for you and the unwrapping as well. So, it's really clean. So instead of having to write all this code, not the x.clone, but just this part, you only have to do the cache get. So all you have to do is this, and it makes the code super clean, like cache insert, cache get, super clean stuff over here. And lastly, oh yeah, if you wanted to, you could also wrap it all in a result to not have the error handling, or to error handle it in the parent. But I don't really. That defeats the purpose of having a wrap in the first place. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. The more important part was organizing the code, which I showed you how to do. And I will, here we go. I can remove that. And in the next video, I want to really go into templates and how to do templates. Lastly, just like a bonus, there's these you can use rocket.toml for configuring the binary. So if you did cargo run, basically, if you did cargo run, and after it compiles, you'll see that it's running on port 2000. So if I did port 2001 and I did cargo run, then it might not even need to compile anything, and it'll just pick up that port from here. So I'll just give a hard example so that you know I'm not screwing around with you. And there you can see that it used the different port. So this is good for debug, like dev environments as well as production environments. I only used it because it wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for me because something's blocking my port 8000, but yeah, it's definitely useful to know. So if you are also running into that problem. But anyways, yeah, next video is going to be about templates.